Did you know Jordan Peterson himself struggled with social anxiety and lack of social confidence as a young man? Well, in this video, I want to share 10 of his top tips which helped me overcome social anxiety and can help you overcome social anxiety too. But if you're new to the channel, let me introduce myself. My name's Ed Barton. I'm a specialist anxiety coach. I struggled with social anxiety for decades before I figured out my own system of how to overcome it. I trained as a monk for years in Japan, and I use all my experience of overcoming anxiety coupled with my training as a Buddhist monk and working with the mind to help clients overcome their anxiety too. The first thing that Jordan Peterson taught me about overcoming social anxiety is that it has a basis in evolutionary psychology. He often talks about the dominance hierarchy and how we suffer with social anxiety because we feel that we're lower down the dominance hierarchy than other people.
You go to a party, your heart's beating. Why? The party is a monster. Why? Because it's judging you. And it's judging you, it's putting you low down the dominance hierarchy, because that's what a negative judgment is. And that interferes with your sexual success. And that means that you're being harshly evaluated by nature itself. Right? So you are confronting the dragon of chaos when you go into the social situation. And so what do? You're like this, right? You hunch over, and that's low dominance. I'm no threat.
The way that I dealt with this was to build my own self-esteem and put myself higher up the dominance hierarchy. I worked out, I got a physique that I was proud of. I started practicing assertiveness, I started saying what I meant, I started doing what I said I would do, I started to build integrity. So by doing this, I built self-esteem, I built respect for myself, and it raised me up my perceived dominance hierarchy. The problem is that I coach many people who are objectively very good looking, very talented, intelligent, but they have such a lack of self-love that they perceive that they are very low down the dominance hierarchy. So in those cases, no matter what you do objectively, no matter what accolades you win or how you change your appearance or your physique, it may never be enough. So you really have to do the inner work of learning to love yourself, letting go of toxic shame, letting go of your cognitive distortions of how you view yourself, focusing on your strengths, fostering a sense of self-appreciation for yourself as you are. Because without that self-love, you will always perceive that you're inferior to other people. You will always perceive that you're low down the dominance hierarchy, no matter how you may appear to other people. So this is a kind of mental dysmorphia, which I see with many clients. Objectively, they're good looking, they're skilled, they're talented, but they have this warped idea that they're so inferior, which makes it very difficult for them to interact with other people, to make eye contact comfortably, because they think they're so far down the dominance hierarchy. So it's important to understand the evolutionary basis of social anxiety and this concept of the dominance hierarchy. But it's very important to understand the importance of self-love, because it's really your own subjective perception of where you are within a dominance hierarchy that is most important. The second thing that Jordan Peterson taught me, which really helped, was he talks again and again about facing the thing that you fear, looking at it. And this applies to both physically, literally, and figuratively. So he often talks about making eye contact with the thing that you're scared of.
What do you pay attention to most? What your right hemisphere signals as anomalous. It attracts your attention. It's like, this isn't going quite right. I'm not looking at that. Wrong. That's what you look at. That's what you look at. What's not going right. Because that's the terrible monster that might eat you, but it's also the place you get all the information.
I used to walk past coffee shops and feel that everybody inside there was judging me behind this big plate glass window. I dare not look. I would get red in the face, look at the floor. I would sometimes cross the road because I didn't want to feel them looking at me. But then when I learned to actually look at the thing that I feared, I would look into the coffee shop and there would actually be no one there oftentimes. It was an imagination that people were looking at me. Or if somebody was kind of vacantly looking at me, I would look at them and then they would look away. But this idea of what was going on out of the corner of my mind's eye was often not even there at all. So you have to literally look at the thing you're scared of. Another example would be on the subway, on the underground, the tube in London. I would have my head down pretending to read a Kindle or a book just to look occupied. And then I would start to think, oh, people can see that I'm not even reading, I'm just pretending to read because I'm socially anxious, and how pathetic I must look. And then I would imagine everybody's looking at me and I would get redder and redder. And then I would think, this is getting so much worse. They can see that I'm just pretending and I'm red and I'm sweating and I'm so weak and nervous. And in my imagination, everybody in the carriage was looking at me thinking, what a pathetic little wretch pretending to read his book. And then when I forced myself to look up and look around the carriage, I was immensely relieved because I realized people were just going about their own business and also pretending to read their own books because they were socially anxious or awkward or just absorbed in their phone. But by looking at the thing, the terror that I was imagining just disappeared and evaporated. It not only applies to looking at the thing literally, it means figuratively. Look the dragon in the eye, slay the beast, which is your social anxiety. You've got to turn around and bite the thing that is chasing you, as my teacher in Japan used to say. There is this fear of judgment, this fear of people. Look at it, go into it, don't just run away from it. A life of avoidance is just a life wasted. It will never help you. You'll never get any further by just avoiding your problems. It gets worse and worse. Trust me, I spent 10 years in China basically avoiding my problems, and it just festered. All these cognitive distortions, the shame, all these problems I was harboring in my head, they just festered and putrefied like rotten wounds and got worse and worse and worse. So you've got to face it, face that dragon head on, look it in the eyes and cut its head off. The third lesson I learned from JP was to make eye contact one-to-one with people in groups.
Never speak to the group of people. That doesn't exist. You talk to individuals, and then they reflect for you the entire group, because they're all entrained. So you look at one person, they broadcast to you what everyone's thinking, and you know how to talk to one person.
And what happened to me was, if I ever had to give a presentation when I had anxiety or look at a group of people who are around a table, I would never make clear, specific eye contact with the people. It would become like a hazy wall of judgment. I would just sort of imagine it as a collective thing that I dare not really look at. And it all became kind of blurry. When you're anxious and you have to do public speaking or even speak to a table of people, sometimes your vision can become very kind of blurry and shaky and you don't see things clearly. Well, what Jordan Peterson taught me was to actually look specifically at people in the eye and talk to them as you talk to a group, because the group is not a big scary collective judging machine. It's actually just comprised of little individuals, and if you look at them you will see they are just individuals. And it's a little bit like this with driving. You dare not look at the car coming towards you. Maybe it's a big Mercedes or a big prestigious car and you just feel like it's intimidating and judging you. But if you make eye contact with the person behind the windshield, you'll see that it's not just this big monstrous machine. It's actually just got a little normal human person in there, and you can make eye contact with them. And that helped with a lot of my driving anxiety as well. The fourth thing Jordan Peterson taught me was to focus my attention outwards.
As soon as you focus on the person, not you, you push your attention outward, use your eye, you push your attention outward, and you start watching. Well, then all your automatic mechanisms kick in and you stop being awkward. Because if we're talking and I'm looking here, I don't know what you're going to do next, and I'm going to put disjunctions into the, they're like bad chords in the melody of our conversation. And the reason is I'm not paying attention.
When we have social anxiety, we get all in our heads, everything's focused on ourselves. We have the spotlight effect where we feel that everybody's looking at us and we just get caught in our head, in our own mental loops, in our racing thoughts. I look pathetic. Why don't I have any social skills? I look so inadequate. Oh, I'm sweating. I'm weak. I'm so awkward. Everybody can see this, and you're just trapped up in your head. If you can project your awareness outwards, this will help you a lot. And for me, this didn't quite go far enough. I also had to add an extra step of when people were talking to me, not only would I project my awareness outwards, but I would really try to genuinely find something that I could find interesting about what they were saying. Whether they had been somewhere that I had been to that I enjoyed, or whether they had a similar interest, I would really try to find a hook point so that I could actually genuinely be interested in what they were saying and not be faking interest. And in these kind of conversations as well, I would try to, as much as possible, forget my own face, just let that go and try and absorb myself in them and what they were saying. And this is not that easy to begin with, it takes practice. But Jordan Peterson's absolutely right in that projecting your awareness outward really helps to counteract this habit of just getting stuck up in your head. The fifth thing that Jordan Peterson taught me was that we are evolved for anxiety. He talks about how the right hemisphere of the brain is primed to look for anomalies and pick out those things that are inconsistent.
What do you pay attention to most? What your right hemisphere signals as anomalous. It attracts your attention.
And this is how we have survived through thousands of generations. If our ancestors were just walking around every day on the savannah going, oh, it's such beautiful, lush green grass every day. I love this blue sky. What a lovely sensation of the heat of the sun on my skin. They would then be vulnerable to predation because they're so busy savoring life. We are primed to survive and not be happy. So our minds are wired to spot inconsistencies. What's that strange shape in the bushes over there? Why is this branch broken? Something must have happened here. Maybe there's a predator here. We are primed to look for anomalies, and this makes us anxious by design. So even understanding that can help you to know that you're not some sort of a freak or a misfit. This is actually an evolutionary mechanism which has allowed you to be successful in replication. You've come from a long line of vigilant ancestors who are also primed for nervousness and anxiety and vigilance. If they weren't, they would have been eaten and you wouldn't be watching this video now. So there is a reason for anxiety. I know it's not comfortable, but even understanding that our brains are wired to be anxious and not naturally make us happy can also help a little bit in understanding yourself. The sixth thing which Jordan Peterson teaches, which I love, is that you have to gradually expose yourself to your fears. You have to actually take actions which build your self-esteem. It's no good just avoiding, as I said. Avoidance will not help you.
What you do with people who are afraid, and to some degree depressed, but certainly anxious, is you lay out what they're anxious about, first of all, in detail. What is it that you're afraid of? What might happen? And then you decompose it into small problems, hypothetically manageable problems, and then you have the person expose themselves to the thing that they're afraid of.
It is proven in the scientific literature that people grow by gradually exposing themselves to what they are scared of. So you take the fear, you deconstruct it into small pieces, and then you expose yourself to elements of that meta fear and gradually desensitize your nervous system. It's what I did, it's worked for me, it's worked for clients, so I highly recommend doing this. The seventh point is that choosing discomfort makes you stronger. And conversely, being subjected to discomfort that you don't choose makes you feel weaker.
If you impose a stressor on two groups of people, and on one group the stressor is imposed involuntarily, and on the other group the stressor is picked up voluntarily, the people who pick up the stressor voluntarily use a whole different psychophysiological system to deal with it. They use the system that's associated with approach and challenge, and not the system that's associated with defensive aggression and withdrawal. And the system that is associated with challenge is much more associated with positive emotion and much less associated with negative emotion. It's also much less hard on you because the defensive posturing system, the prey animal system, man, when that thing kicks in, it's all systems are go for you, you know?
So a good example of this might be choosing to go into an ice bath rather than having cold water just dumped on you. They activate different pathways in the brain, and one of them makes you feel stronger and empowered because you took on the challenge and grew, and the other one makes you feel weak, victimized, and preyed upon. And this applies to social anxiety. If you're sitting in an auditorium or a staff meeting and you choose to put your hand up and answer a question or contribute, that empowers you and enables you to grow. Whereas if you're sitting there at the back with your head down trying not to be chosen, and a superior or a lecturer picks on you and asks you to speak, it completely flips it around and activates a different pathway in the brain so that you feel preyed upon and feel very vulnerable, and that becomes a traumatic event rather than you taking control of the situation and framing it in your own way as an empowering event where you actually control it if you are to choose the discomfort yourself. So this is very important. You can actually practice this in your exposures. Choose your discomfort rather than waiting for something to happen to you which makes you feel victimized. Like I say, you could choose to contribute, you could choose to present, you could choose to go and have that conversation with your boss rather than waiting for him to come to you and hoping it's not going to happen, and then when it does you feel attacked or preyed upon. The eighth thing Jordan Peterson teaches is the importance of bravery.
And what happens isn't that they get less afraid. That isn't what the clinical literature indicates exactly. What happens instead is they get braver. And that's not the same thing, right? Because if you get less afraid, it's like, well, the world isn't as dangerous as I thought it was, you know, silly me. If you get braver, that's not what happens. What happens is, yeah, the damn world's just as dangerous as I thought, or maybe it's even more dangerous than I thought, but it turns out that there's something in me that responds to taking that on as a voluntary challenge and grows and thrives as a consequence. And
that you don't become less fearful, you don't become less anxious, you just feel the fear and do it anyway, and you grow, you become braver. And I have always said that overcoming social anxiety takes a great deal of bravery. At the end of the day, it's fear, right? Anxiety is fear, you're scared. But we don't want to say that as adults. You don't want to say, like me, as I was, I'm a 32-year-old man and I'm scared of speaking to people. I'm scared of speaking to girls because I had bad experiences when I was younger and I'm scared. We don't want to admit that. The word scared doesn't sound nearly as palatable as saying it's anxiety. Well, it is fear, right? We are scared if we're honest about this. And the way that you overcome fear and stop being scared is you have to be brave. You have to just make that decision, right, this is going to be hard. I'm going to go and speak to that person. It takes a great deal of bravery, and there's very little you can do to bridge that gap. You might take medication, you might get drunk, but really, in my mind, it comes down to that line of like, I have to be brave here to cross this, to go over this Rubicon. And yes, I have to muster that courage and do it. So I believe bravery is very important. And as Jordan Peterson says, you don't need to get less anxious, you just need to get stronger and do it despite feeling the fear. Number 9 is that Jordan Peterson says overcoming anxiety is an exciting adventure.
There's nothing simple or trivial at all about the idea of being called to move forthrightly forward into the strange and the unknown. And there's a real adventure that's associated with that, right?
And this really resonates with me and my own experience. I said this from the very earliest days when I started posting content. Social anxiety was a curse. It felt like a curse to begin with, but then it was like a blessing because it pushed me to live a life I never imagined I would. If I was just moderately shy and normally awkward, then I never would have pushed myself to do public speaking classes, take up martial arts, do all these things that I did, form my own business and do different things and move around the world. It pushed me to go to the other extreme. So it really is an exciting adventure. If you take up the challenge to overcome your social anxiety, it will take you places you never imagined possible. I've got clients who have gone on to do improv, who've gone on to manage public speaking classes, who've gone on to act on TV and do all kinds of incredible things. And it's partly because of this process of not only are you going to push against your fears, you're going to overcome them so radically that you're going to push right through to the other side and become a completely different person. And this is what often happens. It's a process where you start to challenge the thing that you've been running from for so long. And then that builds its own momentum and it becomes kind of addictive in seeing what you can do next and what you can do next as your confidence grows and grows. And before you know it, you've not only overcome your fear, you've now gone way beyond where you were before. So I totally agree with point number 9, what Jordan Peterson says. It really is an exciting adventure. And the 10th and final point is that action is key. Action leads to mood.
If you can view yourself acting in a courageous and forthright manner and encountering the world and trying to improve your lot and taking risks, in a non-naive way, well, then you have something that you can comfort yourself with at night. You have to have something real to set against that. It can't be just rationalizations about how, you're a valuable person among others, even though that's true. That's not good enough. You need something that's more realistic to set against that. And observing courage in yourself is definitely one of the things that can help you sleep soundly at night.
That you can't just theorize about stuff, about your self-esteem and why you should esteem yourself and love yourself and think I'm a decent person. You have to go out and do stuff. Exposure therapies, comfort zone challenges, do things you never thought you could do to actually have empirical evidence of, wow, I did a brave thing today. I went up and spoke to my colleague, which I would never normally do because I'm scared of them. I put my hand up in that staff meeting and spoke when I would always keep quiet. You start to build confidence and self-esteem through these things. It's not good enough just to sit around with a worksheet or with a therapist just talking about why you're a good person or what you like about yourself. You have to do stuff that builds respect with yourself. So action is key. Action leads to emotion. Those are the 10 lessons I learned from Jordan Peterson, which helped me overcome social anxiety. If you want to see more content about social anxiety, please check out the videos here, and I'll see you in the next video.